Hello, my name is Helena Jones, and I'm a youth intern with the Congress of Black Women, and this computer awareness tutorial is on text or publication formatting. So we're going to start off by just going through the basic types of formatting of essays or papers. Those would be APA, MLA, Chicago, and journal or research papers, which can be a little bit different because usually you're sending them into like a peer-reviewed journal for maybe medical reasons or law or something like that. So that format may differ a little bit from the things you may see in university or high school. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is the cover page, because most essays will require you to have one. And they just give an indication to the person reading it, what they're going to be reading, from who, etc. So you'll include your name, your student number or student ID, your instructor or professor's name, your class, the title of your paper, and most likely a page number. And then here we just have an example of what a cover page would look like. And it does vary depending on the professor's preference. Usually they give you a sample in class so you know what they're expecting. And when it comes to numbering the pages, usually I find people either go for the center at the bottom of the page or the top right hand corner in the header with your last name, but you can also do the right at the bottom as well. And then just a little note here on plagiarism. The definition here from Merriam-Webster is to use the words or ideas of another person as if they were your own words or ideas. And this comes into play with essays or papers because obviously you're writing your own work, but you're including the thoughts and ideas of other people. So that comes into play for these next couple of slides where I talk about citations and paraphrasing. So starting with in-text citations, a lot of people obviously include works of other authors or other researchers in their own work, and there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to remember to include a little note that says where it's from. Usually in-text citations include the author's last name, the page number, and sometimes the date of publication, such as the year. You probably don't have to include month, day, year, but just the year that it was published. And in-text citations just means usually at the end of the sentence you write the source of these ideas or the quote you pulled out. As for paraphrasing, again, you're welcome to read and reword another person's work for your own text to make sure it makes sense, but you have to remember to oversight so it's clear that these are not your ideas, they are the ideas of someone else. And I included an example here. It says, research shows that children do subsequently better in every aspect of life if they engage in regular exercise. And that was written by Bob Smith as an example. So an example of a way you could use that in your own text would be to say, according to Smith, children benefit from exercise, and then I've listed the page there. You may also want to include the year if you have it, the year that it was published. And then another way of saying it could be, research shows children benefit from exercise, Smith, page 1. So moving on now to superscript and subscript. Superscript just means these small figures, usually numbers, that hover above a text or a word. You can see it in the little image there with the X, and that's the icon from Microsoft Word that you'll see. So that's what you click on to make a letter or a word or a number in superscript. And then you also see the one there for subscript, which are the small numbers that kind of hover below words. To create footnotes, which you will have to do for certain formats. I don't find that they're used very often in high school, but in university you may be asked to use footnotes. And there's a function on Word for that as well. As you can see there, the circled AB with a little 1 by it. So as you get to the end of your document, you'll include a works cited page or a bibliography or a references page. Those are usually the three main titles it's put under, really it's just saying where you got your information. So you're gonna talk about the authors that you quoted inside your text. Most of these reference pages are alphabetical, and also you'll need to remember to include a hanging indent, which is where you have the first line of text pretty much normal setting, and then the next line would be indented to a certain distance. And you can do that hanging indent by highlighting the text and pressing Control-T. And those tips are if you're using Word. So then talking about special citations that you need to keep in mind when doing your bibliography or references page would be obviously where the source came from. When looking for a trustworthy source, a good indication is how their information is presented. If it's a well-known newspaper that's published online, usually they have the author's name there, when it was published, that kind of information. You can pretty much trust that source because you know a lot about where that information came from. So then moving on to web sources, they have special citations depending on the needs of your instructor or your professor. You may sometimes need to include the URL of the site you got it from, and you also need to consider whether that content was originally published online or whether it was something taken from a book or a paper and then published online, because that needs to be included in your citation. Also with journals, you can also have online journals, so you need to take that into consideration when you're citing, because they can have a DOI, which is the same as a URL but for a journal, and it can lead you to that journal page. With government documents, they also have a slightly different citation. My example here is just Statistics Canada. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference, it kind of just changes the author really. And then just some tips and tricks for formatting, because there are a few different formats and you may be required to use each of them during high school or university or your career. OWL Purdue is a great online resource. It's set up by Purdue University. So if you have any tips on how to format an essay or a paper, you can look on there and it's free. Or you can also visit local libraries. A lot of them have tiny little worksheets that tell you how to source things and the best ways to find information. A really good source is Google Scholar, because they have a lot of academic style papers there that you can research, and then you're getting it from a trustworthy source. And if it's a trustworthy source, usually they have the citation ready for you at the bottom of the page, so that's a good indication. And as I said earlier, citation generators can be found online, but are not always up to date on the newest guidelines, the newest rules on MLA or APA formatting. So instead of maybe using a generator, I would recommend maybe buying a book, because the formats change so often. Maybe buy a secondhand book, probably cost you $6 on MLA or APA or whatever format you're using, because I find that it usually really